Thanks for the introduction, and hello everybody. Welcome everybody to that webinar. I'm excited to present to you the new e-invoicing requirements in 2022. This webcast will provide insight into past and future impacts of the CTCs, the so-called continuous transaction controls, and other related trends, and of course how to prepare for the acceleration of these trends as a company actually facing the various requirements in the different countries. We will have a closer look then into the new mandates in France, Poland, and Serbia. And at the end of this presentation, I will tell you how Seeburger can support you on that journey. So now let us kick this presentation off, and let's start with the new opportunities and mandates. To have a brief starting point where most of these have their origin, that's of course caused to the VAT gap that has been estimated to 134 billion in that year 2019 as a reporting year. And of course, many of the tax administrations in the various EU member states are looking for instruments to reduce the VAT gap by collecting the taxes more efficiently and effectively, and that had led to a wave of, I would say, continuous transaction controls in terms of e-invoicing mandates through governmental systems, as well as into e-reporting of VAT on a monthly basis, for example, but as well and more common the real-time, near real-time e-reporting obligations, like you had recognized in Spain in 2017 and in Hungary a bit later introduced. So the business to government e-invoicing directive that forces the public administrations to be ready to receive and process electronic invoices, of course, had triggered e-invoicing adoption in the EU a lot, as many of the suppliers somehow wanted or needed to be able to create electronic invoices towards their public administration customers, and then obviously had used that instrument as well to invoice their business customers in the same way, and that had already increased the adoption. And then in certain countries, the business to government e-invoicing platform was actually extended to business e-invoicing, as it happened in Italy, or a tax reporting platform like the Hungarian online Sambla system had on voluntary basis permitted the tax declaration to become an e-invoice actually. So there is various ways of how the e-invoicing adoption had been increased by business to government directive as well as by the CTC mandates in the EU, for example. The complexity of e-invoicing and CTC mandates is increasing, and more so is the impact on the business processes and systems rising. These are various examples of, let's say, simple paper forms of VAT reporting that have been transformed to web forms, and then use the direct link with an ERP system, but still being very basic couple of fields to be reported every quarter electronically to the UK tax system of the HMRC, for example, to the SAFTI reporting at Poland as an example, or to the more real-time, near real-time VAT reporting based on invoice transactions, for example, in Spain and Hungary that I just mentioned on the previous slide, as well as invoice clearance and distribution requirements in India and Italy and so forth, that have a direct impact on the business processes, as you can't issue an invoice anymore if you can't comply with that mandate, or you can't issue an electronic waybill anymore if you can't comply with such a mandate, as well as it has a direct impact on the ERP systems in use, as data quality is quite crucial, and data integration with such a governmental platform or certified provider working on behalf of the governmental platform becomes really crucial in that sense, that the data that you extract needs to be valid to pass, to map it into the target format, to pass the validations, and as well your ERP system needs to be ready usually to receive status responses containing maybe a unique identification number or any other proof of the clearance process, for example, that then needs to be printed on a PDF invoice that is exchanged with the buyer, or any other ways, of course, being possible in that area. So anyway, there is an impact on the business processes, so can't issue invoice, won't get paid if you can't comply with that mandate, and as well the ERP system and data quality and integration capabilities are very important in that regard. Having that said, this is a CTC trend, a mega trend according to Sovos, that rises more and more and involves more and more countries in the EU, like the ones that we discuss in a second and in more detail later on. So if you're looking at that, for example, and unfortunately there is not enough time to talk through all of the countries and mandates globally, so please understand the CTC roadmap for global corporates as a non-exhaustive overview and not as a direct recommendation of where you do what, or where you need to comply exactly with what countries, and any country that is not listed on here is not relevant. So that's not the full truth. For example, I didn't put any SAFTI reporting requirements on that roadmap. That is, of course, relevant as well to you, and there might be some countries that I talk just on a high level, which are not mentioned on that roadmap here. So let's start with Poland. Poland, as one of the hot topics for today's presentation, Poland has started the KSEF system, or KSEF system, for voluntary use by January this year. That's a system that is a kind of inspired by the SDI system in Italy, and that is used for B2B e-invoicing as well as for B2C invoicing, to be precise. That can be used on voluntary basis, we will explain later. And then you can see that Poland appears here again, in January 2023. That date for Poland B2B mandate, here it becomes mandatory, is not necessarily the 1st of January, it is somewhere in 2023, again, to be precise on that. Then, for example, you can see here in May 2022, Luxembourg as well as Serbia stepping in with the business to government e-invoicing mandate toward the suppliers that then need to send electronic invoices to the public entities in these countries by, for example, Peppol or other means. Luxembourg is on Peppol. Then you can find Luxembourg here as well. So Luxembourg is there 3 times. Why that? Because that's for big suppliers, medium-sized and small suppliers becoming effective that mandate in May, October 2022, and then March 2023. Here, then in July, what you can see here is that there is Italy. Italy, you might think, well, that's old, that's well known already, and that's absolutely true. What's new here is the cross-border e-invoicing requirement that you need to report or send basically electronic Fattura PA XML invoice files for cross-border invoices, meaning that are invoices received by your Italian legal entity that have been sent from foreign suppliers to that legal entity in Italy, or that are invoices that your Italian legal entity had sent to customers, to buyers outside of the borders of Italy. These need to be sent through that existing SDI process, basically in the existing Fattura PA XML format. Then Mexico as well is not a really new item on the list, but it's worth to mention there is a new version 4.0 that is to be used since January on voluntary basis, January this year, and from July onwards, that's the only version permitted to be used. The current or the old version 3.3 then is going to be deprecated. Romania B2B e-invoicing through the e-Factura system in Romania shall become mandatory for certain supplies, B2B supplies only that are considered high-risk supplies. Alcohol, for example, is one of them as of 1st of July 2022. Then Serbia, we touched quickly here for the business to government e-invoicing obligation for the supplier that needs to send invoices to the public administration. Here it's the other way around. You or the customer that receives or the buyer that receives invoices from public contracting authority that you need then to receive and process electronically. And then Serbia kicks in with the B2B e-invoicing mandate. So these will be discussed later on as well in more detail, same as Poland and France that I will touch in a second. Saudi Arabia, I skipped Slovakia, excuse me for that. Slovakia is planning to implement a B2B mandate based on the model, again, of the Italian STI. So let's see where this is leading to finally. Then Saudi Arabia, they had started an e-invoicing rollout in 2 phases. Phase 1 is already completed. That was the phase to eliminate the paper invoices and handwritten invoices by producing kind of at least invoices with an invoicing system in a kind of electronic way. Second phase is the so-called integration phase. That's what's starting here somewhere in 2023. Again, that's not the 1st of January necessarily for that. That needs then the suppliers and the buyers to integrate with that governmental system in Saudi Arabia, and then to exchange electronic invoices with the system somewhere involved, at least integrated with that system. Then Spain. In Spain, a royal decree was published in February this year, and according to that decree, electronic B2B invoices with governmental pre-approval, so kind of clearance, by the Spanish tax authority AEAT will become mandatory for companies that are established in Spain. In addition to that new requirement, there are other requirements regarding the billing, the invoice creation software or information systems. These systems, they need to be ready to include certain additional information, for example, a QR code or alphanumeric identification code. Then France, we touch later in more detail, but there is it is 3 times on that roadmap here, because for the sending, it's the big companies being due in July 24, then the medium-sized ones in January 25, and all the rest in January 26. But that's just the sending side. The receiving side, they are all due already here in July, regardless of the size of the company. And then there's Latvia that will introduce B2B and B2G e-invoicing through the Peppol network in 2025, January. And further countries likely to introduce e-invoicing or CTC mandates. So for example, let's have a look at Australia very briefly. So they started with the Peppol-based invoicing between Australia and New Zealand, and so that's already introduced there. But now they would like to increase the adoption of e-invoicing through the Peppol network. And what did they do for that purpose? they introduced a right, a business e-invoicing right, it's called, that allows the buyer basically to request by law electronic invoices from their suppliers. So what does it mean? Basically, the supplier, as soon as one of their buyers or his buyers requests an electronic invoice according to that law, to this right that the buyer has, then the supplier needs to get ready to produce electronic invoices, and that then is a kind of, I would say, it's a kind of a bit soft deadline, as you can still negotiate with your buyers, of course, but you know that you have to prepare for that because your buyers have the right to request electronic invoices. Well, then Belgium is on Peppol for business to government e-invoicing. I think since 2016 is a long-term Peppol authority in the Peppol network. Active, and so Peppol is very common for the Belgian country, and they are looking to introduce a B2B e-invoicing mandate, and well, it's not confirmed yet, but is of course not too unlikely that that will be based on Peppol as well. Let's see if it will be the four-corner Peppol model, or maybe the new CTC five-corner Peppol model that they are aiming to introduce in Belgium. But it's on the list, and it looks like Peppol, not confirmed, as I said. Bulgaria seems to be motivated to introduce continuous transaction controls, measures of electronic invoicing and tax reporting. Let's see where it will lead to. China is introducing digitized invoices after the Fabio pilot project. Is a new project for the digitized invoices now starting in certain regions. Germany had, with the new traffic light coalition government, announced its intention to implement mandatory B2B invoicing as soon as possible, whatever that might be. So not clear how fast it will go in Germany for the B2G invoicing. I would say we weren't the quickest around, but okay, let's have a look. Israel prepares for mandate for online registration of sales invoices based on a Chilean model, Chile. Japan is currently promoting e-invoicing through an initiative promoted or run by the IPA. They became Peppol authority. They are looking at Peppol and want to introduce a qualified invoice-based method in October 2023. So here that can become as well a Peppol CTC model, but for Japan in general, it's very eager planning, I think, that they did, and it's a big step as they produce kind of summary invoices on paper once a month usually, and now want to move to Peppol invoice by invoice, or maybe even summary invoices. So let's see where it goes to. So there's a lot happening there as well, and you can see Peppol here and Peppol there, and so Peppol plays an increasing role as well, from my perception. Slovenia is about to introduce a mandatory e-invoicing system for B2B transactions. And then there's the US, where the Business Payments Coalition and the Federal Reserve had worked with a couple of organizations together to develop standards for e-invoicing and payments and B2B payments. And they were looking at Peppol as well, but I think that's still a bit vague when there will be coming any kind of mandate. So, but you see, it's moving, and that's of course not all. I can add to that list that India had just reduced the threshold for companies being mandated to issue or to register invoices through that Indian invoice registration portal. That requirement exists since 2019, and the threshold was continuously reduced. And now it's again in April reduced from 50 Indian crore rupees to 20 Indian crore rupees, so that is roughly 2.6 million US dollars, roughly, as an annual threshold of revenue. Right, so there's definitely more, but let's have a look on France. So France, second biggest economy in Europe, with almost 4 million businesses being impacted by that new mandate, and quite a large volume of invoices in B2B and as well in B2G, introducing a mandate that has a couple of objectives. So that's e-invoicing and e-reporting. I think that's important to mention. So it's not e-invoicing only, it's as well e-reporting. E-reporting that can have certain dimensions, payments, for example, to be reported, cross-border transactions, sales of goods and services in EU, outside of EU, cross-border, for example. Basically, almost all transactions kind of get reported somehow through the invoice itself, or through the invoice extracted data, or through dedicated reporting requirements in real time, or every 7 days, 10 days, whatever. The frequency has not been confirmed finally, but there's quite some requirements regarding the reporting as well. And of course, what the objectives are is that they want to increase the competitiveness of the businesses by reducing the administrative burden through the e-invoicing and e-reporting processes. Well, I would say that's not the main objectives. I think that comes in second bullet point here. That's to combat the tax fraud and reducing the VAT gap, of course. And then, yeah, as a nice benefit, of course, the more it's reported, the more you know about the business transactions, and then you can adjust the politics, the decisions, the parameters of economy in the country to increase and improve the business revenue, of course, and then the taxes as well rise, and all this stuff. And it should make the tax returns a bit easier through pre-filling, as many of the information gets reported electronically already. What is the rollout plan for France? I mentioned already, for big, large companies, 300 roughly, it's 1st of July for the sending. 1st of July is as well the date for all of the 4 million entities or businesses in France for the receiving of electronic invoices. But what does it mean? I explain in a second. Then the second phase for sending is 1st of January 2025. That's relevant for the medium-sized businesses, roughly 8,000 in France, and then all the rest is due on 1st of January 2026. So what does mean due? Due means you may start earlier, and that's of course a good thing to know. You may start earlier. You don't need to wait until the deadline shows up. You can start already as a micro business, for example, submitting invoices by 1st of July 2024. That's possible according to that plan, at least. And that's of course something you should keep in mind. So start a bit earlier, not exactly to the deadline. That will be recommended. Maybe not in the first wave, but yeah, as soon, let's say, as you have time and as it makes sense. That's important to know as well for that mandate. And then let's have a look what is the processes look like for the French mandate. So that's often compared to the Mexican Y model. You might have heard of that. That's because you can see that kind of Y here in the middle. So that's the Y. And what does it mean? The French mandate, and here it's mainly focused now on e-invoices and not so much on the reporting part. But if you're looking at that, you have actually the bottom half of the slide that looks pretty much like, for example, Italy. So you can connect to the Correspond platform, sending an invoice to that platform. That platform can forward the invoice to the recipient, or the recipient can download from the platform, however that works technically. So you can send an invoice through that platform to your buyer, domestic flow, electronic invoice. What is the formats that you need to have present to that platform? In Italy, that's only one, but in France, they have actually 3 different standards that they support, and one of them is the UBL 2.1 syntax. Another one is the cross-industry invoice CII from the UNC fact, and the third one is the hybrid standard called Factor X. It's a PDF with embedded cross-industry invoice XML file where there's certain profiles, so basic EN 16931 and extended and so forth, that can be used for that. But what does it mean? 3 different standards are supported by that platform if you connect directly with that platform. Directly connection could mean that your ERP is good enough to connect directly through that interface that is provided by the national platform here, or that you have a kind of, let's say, middleware here, or provider, EDI provider here, or if you're the recipient, of course, you can have the same on that side here. So that's possible. Standard formats, not 1, but 3, connect to the platform, send invoice, and so forth. So that's the, let's say, the easy one, if you can survive with the 3 standards that are there, and if you're maybe not using EDI invoices for a long time in France with your business partners, and these request them for them. And for that purpose, there's, let's say, the upper half of that slide, and you can, as an invoice issuer, work with your provider. That's a certified private platform. What does it mean? These are certified for extracting invoice data from invoices, so that would be the orange one here. Yeah. The gray one is the invoice, the orange one is the extract for reporting purposes. That creates a couple of validations and provides the extracted data to the national Correspond platform. And if okay, then the invoice is forwarded to the receiver platform, which is again a private platform, and that then can send the invoice to the buyer, however that works. And of course, as I said, there might be status information for the invoice life cycle that are processed, or maybe acknowledgements from the platform that are processed. So that there's quite some flows around the invoice or invoice extraction file here, just that you have seen it. And as I said, there's other reporting requirements, of course. For example, your buyer pays the money. This needs to be reported as well. And as well, if the buyer is a foreign buyer, not from France, that needs to be reported as well. And there is quite some other reporting obligations. So I'm not going through all of this, but just that you get an idea what's the story. And of course, it can be that if you choose a private platform for the receipt, you can receive as well an invoice, of course, that have been that's the mouse, that has been sent this way to you. That's possible, or you receive one that has been sent this way to you. So the private platform can connect to both, to other private platforms and to the national platform. Well, private platforms, I think there have been roughly 30 applied for getting certified. Likely there will not be 30 going through that certification process successfully, but somehow there will be a number between, let's say, 10 to 30 providers to be expected for France, being a certified private platform. If you meet this, for example, then that's the way to deal with that. Others can connect directly to Chorus Pro, so that depends a bit on the requirements that you have. Definitely, it can be prepared already to be ready to process electronic invoices in these standards in a way. Right. How can Seeburger imagine to work with you with that mandate? Well, with strong local support from Seeburger's office in Paris, we serve our clients, our multinational clients, as well as our French national clients, with various GS1 certified French e-invoicing services, including, for example, EDI, DMAT. So Seeburger is already, as of now, at least an EDI provider in France, doing specific DMAT checks on EDI invoices, producing invoice summary and partner lists for archiving purposes in France, and all this stuff, as well as we have direct connections to the existing Chorus Pro B2G platform for business to government e-invoicing through UBL invoices, for example, and as well we have the Factorix, aka Zugfurt in Germany, services available as of now. So we are not yet a certified private platform, as none of the other providers is so far, but of course we are aiming at that, or having, let's say, a service including that certified private platform service as well. So we're looking at that and analyzing the requirements. This is how we can imagine to support you here, and of course we can imagine as well to support you here with the direct integration based on services or on-premises platforms. Right, Poland. Poland as well is on that journey to CTC, to a CTC mandate, as I explained, started with the platform voluntarily in January this year, and then in 2023, somewhere that should become mandatory. So Poland has, of course, as well the same objective to reduce the VAT gap more and more, even though Poland had started already with other instruments like the SAFTI reporting in the past to reduce the VAT gap in that country. Now, I don't say it in full because I don't speak Polish, but let's say the KSEF platform that is going to be introduced, or was introduced already now on voluntary basis for the electronic invoices in B2B and B2C. The test phase was supposed to start on 1st of October last year. I haven't seen that really starting that day. Voluntary, the system should have been available 1st of January this year. It was available in January, and then it shall become mandatory in 2023. What's the scope here? Basically, in the beginning now, in the voluntary phase, you can issue, of course, invoices and receive invoices on paper in an electronic way, like EDI, PDF. So as before, but new is the structured e-invoices, the so-called FA_VAT XML-based invoices. That schema have been published by the KSEF last year. It's an XML schema for the invoices, no surprise. And yeah, through that new format, you can send invoices to KSEF, and from KSEF, basically, the buyer can receive the invoices. Requirement for that is that the buyer is approving that process. So you can't just send it to all your buyers. You need buyer's approval prior to sending the invoices out to them, and some other registration requirements, of course. If you then have a look at the process, basically how it looks like, You on the left-hand side, for example, as the invoice issuer, you using an API interface to send the structured e-invoices, the FA_VAT invoices, to the KSEF or KSEF platform. That then validates the invoices that you had submitted, assigns a unique ID with date and timestamp, and archives. That's important. That's actually a point that I didn't touch explicitly for France, but for France, archiving feature is still discussed and not finally decided yet. For Poland, the archiving is supposed to be included as a default component in that KSEF system. Then, when that has been performed, the invoices are received by the receivers, by the buyers, for example, through an API. If you're, let's say, business receivers and capable of using that interface, or for the smaller ones through a web portal where you can see the structured invoices, and then B2C for the consumers, basically seeing that. And in addition to that, for the sending, there is as well an option for the smaller suppliers to issue them by manually keying them into a portal, for example. How can Seeburger imagine to become a provider here for the sending side? You know, we take your data, map it, and provide it through an API to the KSEF that then makes it available to the receiver. And for the receiver side, no big surprise, we are on the other side of the KSEF platform, taking the invoices from there and providing them to you, to your accounts payable processes in a way that you can work with that well. Having that said, for Poland, Serbia looks kind of similar on the first glance. Okay, there is a platform that's called SEF, so not KSEF, but SEF, and the E is in capital letters spelled here for Serbia. So that's a difference already in that. But again, it's a portal that they use, and they use electronic invoices in XML format. They rely on the UBL 2.1 syntax there, and is an API in a similar way as it is for Poland that is used to connect with that SEF platform. And again, there is a kind of system for smaller invoice recipients, like a web portal that they can log on, like it was available in Poland. That's here in Serbia called SUF, S-U-F. And there is, of course, some penalties. There is some archiving in there, and so forth. So looking at the process for Serbia now, how does it look like? As I said, as I said, there have been various deadlines. The business to government one, so that's the one for you sending to public receivers, is the 1st of May. You need to be ready to send. Then in July, you have to be ready to receive, if you receive any invoices from public entities in Serbia. So I'm not sure about that. Is probably not the biggest share of invoices that you receive. And then finally, 1st of January 2023, there is the B2B e-invoicing mandate, where you need to receive and send invoices with your business partners. You exchange invoices B2B with your partners. Right. Looking at the flow, it looks very similar on that high level here as it is for Poland, as I mentioned. So again, we are using that API and an API interface to send invoices, excuse me, to the SEF platform, and then the receiver can download from there. What has actually Serbia and Poland in common is that the documentation so far is I would say probably not the final version, and that especially the receipt of invoices, or the API to download or receive invoices from the SEF, yeah, seems to be, let's say, less important than the sending part so far, just from reading the documentation. The amount of content is for the sending more than for the receiving, let's put it that way. So how can Seeberger imagine to support you here? It's for the sending, no surprise. We connect to the SEF. We actually convert the data and speak with the API and so forth. And for the receiver side, it's the same story. And that's, of course, here not a ready to sell service. That's what we imagine, what we plan to develop for Serbia. Clearly, same for Poland, same for France. Yeah? So how can we help you? In general, as you can see, there is a lot of countries in the EU, but not only in the EU, moving towards these continuous transaction controls and e-invoicing mandates, e-reporting mandates, sometimes combined, sometimes coming from B2G or any kind of tax reporting requirement that is expanded to invoicing, like in Hungary, for example. And that trend is unstoppable. And the question here is basically how you will follow all these different requirements and mandates. And unfortunately, you know, they not have chosen Peppol 5-corner CTC model everywhere so far. I mean, okay, that's brand new, but anyway, they copy, they change, they adopt to their needs, they add or reduce functionality. So from country to country, these look quite different, even though, of course, in PowerPoint they look very similar, but in reality they are not looking that similar as I might have raised the impression in that presentation here. And the CTC and e-invoicing requirements, they, you know, you need agile, flexible solutions, because what happens is a requirement is going live, and within the first year you have 3 updates at least in the version or in the interface, in the status handling, etc. So there's lots of changes before the go live and as well after the go live for the first couple of years that we have observed for many of the mandates. Then, of course, if they're getting more mature, these updates might come less frequently and with less impact, maybe, or depending. But yeah, then it's getting a bit more stable. But even there, you have updates like you can see in Mexico in very old mandate, and within 3-4 years, it's another update coming. So, and of course, it's important that you have seamless ERP or SAP integration. Ideally, a partner that can support any ERP somehow and provides all the necessary options with the integration with the ERP that monitors requirements for the services that you have, that proactively notifies you, that has an automatic exchange with the governmental platforms or certified providers, for example, that can provide secure data center services, cloud services to you, that has integrated monitoring functionality, compliance check where needed on invoice content, for example, as well as long-term archiving if it is needed, or if you insist, or if you prefer to have the archiving included in that service instead of using maybe the public archive, if you even can reject the public archive, like in case KSEF or etc. And of course, has an audit trail with the invoice, the source file, for example, a PDF visualization, the target invoice that has been submitted to the platform, a status response returned from that platform for that process, and so forth, that are archived together under that invoice file, basically. So thanks